Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Thank you, Jim.
Stewart, how is BC's path to LNG wealth and prosperity going?
Well, it's going rather well. We had a new report out this week from the Conference Board of Canada on the ways in which Indigenous people in Canada can engage in the LNG opportunity. You know, it's not just a BC thing. We're seeing a lot of interest in Quebec. They realize that natural gas is a part of that whole clean energy future, and they need to get on top of it. So these issues of how can the consents and the prosperity be shared around the whole country are ones that I know a lot of people are talking about every day. But in terms of BC, the Coast GasLink project, the pipeline that will get the gas from northeast BC to the north coast of the province, that does appear, despite COVID and all of the trials and tribulations that come from this, and not to mention some of the delays that happened earlier in the year because of protests, that seems to be pretty much on track. When it comes to the LNG Canada project being built in Kitimat, which is the giant, I like to call it a giant fridge, where they will cool that gas, so it is greatly reduced in volume and can literally be poured onto a ship and taken to market. That project, which is a big undertaking, it's been going for years, is well underway. I don't think they have undue delays. There were some issues with the COVID induced staffing levels. I mean, this has affected everybody in some way. It's no surprise it affects an energy project, and they've talked about that at the project. But they do seem, the engineers and project planners, to have figured out what they need to do to move forward. So I think it's in good shape for those first cargoes to be moving by the middle of the decade.
Now, we talk about the Shale Revolution. That's fracking. How's that going?
The Shale Revolution it's a great term because there was some revolutionary technology. The fact that they could control a drill bit to turn and go horizontal and know where it was going, that was part of the revolution. Another part of it was the underground sensing technology that allowed them to see where that drill bit was headed while it was heading there, and in real time. You know, I've been in one of the control rooms in Calgary where they're literally looking over the shoulders of the operators in the field, maybe hundreds of miles away, seeing what they're doing, telling them, watch out for that, go around this way. It's incredible technology. And then, of course, fracking itself, which is the fracturing, which is when they pressurize the well and they pump in water at a high pressure, and they undertake the action that the word fracking is derived from. They fracture the rock under that pressure. It's soft shale rock, so it's not that hard to fracture. And then they drive the liquid in there. It carries special sand in it that once they fracture the sand, the cracks created are held open by the cracks that go in there, and that's what lets the gas flow out over the coming years. So it's a whole combination of these. And then, of course, once you get the gas out, you have to get it to where it's needed, which is where you come into pipelines. And then you have this phenomenon that, well, you can't build a pipeline to China or Japan from Canada. Well, maybe you could somehow, but it's just not practical. You've got to put it on a ship, and that's where LNG comes in. So you combine this whole chain of innovation and investment. It's one of the incredible energy stories of our time. Now, shale is not just a producer of gas. There is, in Canada's case, a lot of liquids in natural gas, wet gas, they often call it, and those liquids are taken off. Essentially, it's a light oil, and it's used for different purposes. They use some of it for diluent, so it goes to the oil sands to help to thin out the oil sand product when it needs to be moved around. And so these things, they work together in a pretty marvelous energy ecosystem. But, here's a big thing geopolitically. I mean, it's an interesting story for Canada, but when you go to the States, it's over these past few years when the Shale Revolution has really made a difference. It's made America energy self-sufficient, which they never saw coming. And it actually leads to one of the big problems and challenges we have right now in Canada-U.S. relations. So a lot of the energy planning that was laid down a couple of decades ago, with Canada being a premium supplier adjacent to it by land of energy products, suddenly they've got their own. Suddenly they've got the ability to export. They passed legislation that allowed the U.S. to become an oil exporter. It was actually expressly prohibited from being that before Obama. He changed that. And once that happened, it began to exist in a whole different, energy market internationally. They're shipping American oil to Europe, to China, to all kinds of places. And they also have dealt with the fact that Venezuela, which provided a lot of heavy oil, isn't providing it. Now Canada is doing that job. We're sending heavy oil to California. As soon as TMX, Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline, is done, we'll be able to get full market value for Canadian oil in theoretically any market in the world that can be reached by a ship, because we will finally have so-called tidewater access. Now, how does this tie into the American shale? I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, Jim, but what I think the interesting thing is here, the opportunity that President Biden brings in here is a chance to reflect on where we are now. Shale has happened. Biden is somewhat ambiguous about whether he wants a lot more shale in the U.S. He's committed to banning it on federal lands, which doesn't really amount to much because there isn't a lot of fracking on federal lands. So that promise won't change anything should he enact it. But there definitely is a shelf life for American shale. There will be a time when the productivity they've seen in recent years will begin to decline. And that's, I think, where the Canadian energy story starts to figure again into the future of American energy. But then there's the whole new context of climate policy. And what does it mean that we're in an energy transition? How do the reserves that we have be adapted to changing times? Because that's going to happen. It's just a matter of how it happens. And, there are those who say, just shut them down. Well, if you want to do that and stop the supply of fuels for farming and manufacturing and all kinds of transportation, it's not just about driving your car to go to work. A huge amount of transportation is of heavier machinery that you can't just electrify that easily. I know there's one rather dodgy company in the States that is talking a lot about that. They want to embrace the Tesla model, but their founding CEO was just found out to be a giant cheat and was fired. So they're trying to, reformat that. But at the present time, I don't see any serious prospect for large commercial transportation to be electrified. Who knows what could happen in the future? I certainly don't. But based on what we have now, we are going to need a huge amount of hydrocarbon energy that is reliable, affordable, accessible. And I think the most interesting thing about it is it's subject to improvement. We don't have to accept all of the negatives that do come with fossil fuels into the future. We can refuse to accept that by innovating, doing things differently, removing the carbon that we don't want to be emitted, so that doesn't happen, but still getting the benefits of the hydrocarbon molecule, which has essentially been the very most important building block of modern civilization.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Value from success, growth in discovery. Golden Arrow Resources is a well-funded gold-copper exploration company with proven management and prospective properties in Chile, Argentina, and Paraguay. Golden Arrow trades on the Toronto Venture Exchange, symbol GRG, on Frankfurt, symbol G6A, and the OTCQB, symbol GARWF. For more information, visit us at goldenarrowresources.com or call Sean at 778-686-0135.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, what happens if the Keystone Pipeline gets shut down in the U.S.? Does that mean Alberta oil is landlocked forever?
Well, I think this is going to be a lively debate. It was interesting to see that the Biden group coming in to power has not made it one of their apparently top priorities to put that onto the agenda. It might be that until we know what happens in Georgia, the Senate runoffs, and figure out what the power relations are in Washington. You know, is Biden going to come in and be a president who's got a lot of sway and power to implement a very aggressive legislative agenda, or will he be someone whose space is very much circumscribed by a lot of Republican power in the Senate and a stronger Republican group in the House? So if you say, what are the most aggressive things he would do if he had a lot of power, fulfilling the promise that he talked about during the election campaign of killing the Keystone XL pipeline from Alberta, connecting into a major U.S. energy distribution system. It might be hard to do that if he's got some areas of the country that he's concerned about where there's a lot of the more building-oriented, construction-oriented labor union support for Democrats who maybe aren't too keen to see 12,000 jobs go away from canceling KXL. And it might also be that it's not an object of the new U.S. administration to come in and humiliate its ally to the north that has been, always with the states through thick and thin. If the first thing they do is come in and say, hey, Canada, we're going to give you a good boot, by ensuring that you are going to not be able to get full market value for your most important export. So how's that for your good buddy to the south? Does Biden really want to send that signal? I think there's going to be a lot of consideration about this as it goes forward. You'll notice that Prime Minister Trudeau here in Canada has been supportive of KXL. So although on other pipelines we know that the messages are mixed or negative, on this one they're supportive. So a good way to start a healthy relationship, one would think, with the Canadian ally from Biden's perspective would be to just hold back. I don't think he wants to disappoint his supporters by saying, no, I love that KXL. After all, I was fooling you. I don't think that's how it's going to roll. I think it is potentially going to be more of a thoughtful geopolitical and economic analysis. I mean, here we are in the pandemic recovery phase, or hoping to enter it soon, and simply, stroking out major sources of business and trade activity that will hasten the recovery might not be the thing that a new president wants to access to make his mark. So I would be a little cautious at this point in predicting one way or the other exactly where it's going to go.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, what about Vancouver's emergency climate plan? How is that working out, and is it an emergency that needs some drastic action? What's your take on it?
Vancouver has long served as a source of amusement and bemusement on all kinds of things, and they aren't disappointing now. I'm just reading my old friend and colleague Kirk LaPointe's column in BIV. It's headlined, "Rewrite Needed for City Hall's Climate Emergency Plan Sci-Fi Thriller." And Kirk has taken a look at this new 371-page staff document on the climate emergency and some things that they want to do. Now, he mentions our author, Matt Horn. I know Matt, he showed up in an interview we both did one day on his bicycle. And I have a bicycle too. I love biking, but Matt is I think a lot of the bureaucrats at Vancouver City Hall, big advocate of cycling, and he's obviously fortunate to have the good health and ability to have a commute that is practical distance for him to do that. Not everyone is like that, unfortunately, which I think they don't really get at City Hall. They want everybody to get around on a bicycle. They see in this plan that 9 out of every 10 trips from your home or your work, if you are based in Vancouver, that's 90% of those trips will, by 2030, so in a decade, will be by walking, by cycling, or by taking a bus or some other kind of public transit. 90%. So only one of those 10 will be when you are getting in your car. A lot of people, I would say it's probably the other way around right now. 90% are getting in your car. And maybe that's too much. Maybe we should be thinking before walking 3 blocks to get a loaf of bread, or, walking rather than driving. Sure. We should be having that discussion, but I think a lot of people will be struck by this idea that, it's this level. Another part of the vision is that 5 of every 10 trips taken with vehicles in Vancouver will be from electric vehicles by 2030. So we have to go from 3-4%, or maybe it's even lower, of the fleet that is now electric vehicles to 50% in 10 years. And right now, if you're buying an electric car, you're buying either a rich person's plaything for a very large premium, thanks to Tesla, and they're beautiful cars. People who have them love them. I can appreciate the aesthetic, and there's lots of cool things about them. But they're very expensive right now, and the small ones are kind of, I've seen a lot of those new ones. You know the one I mean, Jim? Those smaller Teslas? They look all right, but they're kind of like a Honda Civic used to be. The Honda Civic, by the way, is now, you look at it, it's a proper car. But remember back when the Honda Civic was sort of
I owned one.
Yeah.
The Honda CVCC.
They went forever, and they were incredibly reliable, and people who had them loved them. But they were just this little car that other motors looked at and said, well, I'm not sure I'd see myself driving that. And that's all changed now. But that new Tesla, if the vision is that the affordable Tesla is that, you're putting your 2-3 kids in there, and your groceries and a couple of bikes, and you're zipping up to Whistler, maybe not. You might need to find another way to do that. Now, like lots of other things, there's change happening, and hopefully that will affect this kind of thing. So we need for this vision to come about to see a lot of things happen. We've also seen, here's the city of Vancouver, they're saying, cut emissions 40%, from buildings and construction projects. We're seeing them talking about this big zone, not just downtown, but way up to 16th Avenue like London. If you've been to London, it costs a fortune to drive your car in there now. It's a shocking amount. I saw the new figure. They've raised it for the pandemic. It's, I didn't translate it from pounds properly, but I think it was like over $20 just to drive your car in for, any amount of time. And that's what they're talking about for Vancouver. So if you live at 17th Avenue and you want to drive to Broadway, you have to pass into the permitted zone. And I presume the vision is some sort of electronic monitoring where it just automatically charges you a toll when you pass through that cordon around the fossil fuel free center of Vancouver. This is quite the vision. You know, if people are living in parts of Kitts that are inside of this, they would be facing a much higher charge. If they are knuckle draggers with a emissions spewing vehicle rather than an enlightened electric car. Now, we know there's all sorts of issues with these things that haven't been resolved, and it could be that this is more of an aspirational report, but it's certainly written as a manual to council to say, look, here's what you need to do. Now we want you to pass the necessary enabling regulation or bylaws to make it possible to do that. So, you know, it could well be just around the corner. And for the average person hearing all this together, if you live in Vancouver and you're subject to these things, you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, they want my taxes to go up. I am paying a carbon tax to the provincial government. We're hearing about the federal government's plans very soon to implement what they're calling a clean fuel standard, which will add probably $1,300 in what you pay in additional taxes. So you've got the fuel taxes you pay at the pump and always have. You've got the carbon tax on top of that. You've got these city penalties for driving a car that one bureaucrat on a bicycle doesn't want you to have. And it just stacks up and up. And this is supposed to change the outcome of global climate. I think when you compare the actions to the outcomes, I think the one big thing that I haven't seen any evidence of is that this will affect anything.
Well, the traffic jams I've seen in downtown Vancouver, I think, are caused by the bicycle lanes that separate bikes from regular traffic, and it can take you 45 minutes to go 3 blocks during rush hour.
Now, are there a lot of bicycles using those bike lanes when you're downtown?
I see some taxis using them.
Oh, but bicycles, not so much.
No.
I mean, there's probably a few sweet weeks in the summertime when you drive over, if you're still able to drive over Burrard Bridge, I don't know, can you? In those couple of lanes left, you know, it's teeming with people. They love it. And what's nicer than going from your, you know, $1 million condo in Kitts, driving down or riding down on your bicycle over that gorgeous bridge with the views. As soon as it's raining, where are all those cyclists? They're getting to work some other way. Now, maybe with the pandemic, they're not going to work. They're working from home. So it becomes more of a moot point. We don't need as much of this for cars or bicycles. But, you know, we've got this vaccine, 90% success rate. Here we are in almost the middle of November. The idea that we could be looking at a vaccine-driven solution to the pandemic is a big relief. But next summer in Vancouver, on a beautiful summer day, you'll again have the same thing. It's not going to change. People are not going to say, well, City Hall says I have to ride my bike all the time, even in that dreary weather when I would much rather not be freezing. I'd rather just go to a nice warm taxi, Uber, my own car, or bus, if there's enough buses.
Well, what if you're a business carrying heavy goods? Are you supposed to take your concrete load on a bicycle?
Well, they don't seem to deal with that thing, and it seems to be that's what it's pointing to, and it doesn't answer these questions. Like, what are you meant to do if you're 90% of the trips have to be by some other form than a vehicle that you own. I mean, not even an electric car is good enough. It has to be no car, on foot, on bicycle, or by bus. Otherwise, you're some sort of transportational criminal. It's when you're small children, equipment. You're going to go to Whistler for the weekend, but you've got to get on a bus downtown to get on another bus. You got to be kidding me! Who's going to be doing that?
Well, also, what if you're a business owner in the core area of Vancouver? Does this not send a message? We don't want your business. Do not come to Vancouver. We just don't want you here. If you're planning to buy something and pack it out.
Yeah, well, you've got to get the merchandise to your store, so your wholesalers who are delivering to your location, whether that's food for your restaurant or stuff for your shelves, they presumably would be affected by this levy to enter downtown, and that's just simply going to be passed along to the consumer. So I guess this might be good for restaurants outside of the cordon zero carbon, and not so good for those inside of it. So if I was a business owner in that area, I would probably be pretty upset because your business has just been nearly destroyed. Maybe you're teetering on the edge of bankruptcy today, and now this comes along. I mean, talk about terrible timing, eh? That the signal to businesses, it doesn't really matter what's going on in the economy. We're going to be charging onward with our measures to, we argue, save the world. Now, there's really no evidence that any of these measures will make any difference whatsoever to global climate outcomes, which is, I think, the real fly in the ointment. Why are you doing these things if they really are so insignificant? Where we're seeing changes that are positive ones that people want and welcome are in more efficient cars. If you look at over the last 10 years, I spent a lot of time with the stats recently, trying to figure out the rate of improvement of the much maligned internal combustion engine. And if you look, it's an incredible amount. It's like 15%, I think, improvement in efficiency over the last decade. So if you bought a 2009 Honda Accord, this is actually the one I looked at, versus one in 2019, those 10 years, you're getting a car, the newer car, that is just so much more efficient. These trends will continue. I mean, maybe the rate of fuel efficiency improvement will decline a bit. But if we continue with it, we will actually meet the targets that are in the international climate panel's own booklet or publication on the targets that we should have for reducing it. So we're actually already on track to have internal combustion cars that meet the standards laid down by the international authorities, but this is being completely ignored by Vancouver City Hall. They don't want to know about it because they don't want anyone to be able to use the hydrocarbon.
Stuart, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks, Jim.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You can find him on Twitter at SJMuir. If you have any questions for Stewart or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com, our YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at HowStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.